Guys, this is really, really tasty. I think this is my favorite spread. I could eat like a Viking every single day. You better get out your battle axe and shield, because today we're going back to 800 AD to recreate a Viking solstice feast, including a stew that has reindeer and venison in it, alongside a flatbread that's usually made with tree bark. Hey there, I'm Sohla El-Whaley, and this is Ancient Recipes with Sohla. In each episode, we take a dish you may recognize and attempt to recreate one of the oldest versions of it to ever exist. So it's a little cooking, a little history, and a whole lot of me. What's not to love? Is it just me? But when I think of a Viking feast, I picture a long braided-haired warrior, painted faces, gnawing on a big old animal leg and guzzling mead. Well, in this episode, we're gonna flip the script on you. Viking feasts were long and had unending food and drink, but the cooking was relatively modest. And I mean, I get it. Who has time to cook when you're out there conquering the medieval seas? Their feasts were very much family-style shared plates with farm-to-table vibes, and they usually drank beer instead of mead. So today we're gonna make a Viking skause, or stew, made with reindeer, venison, and vegetables, alongside a really thin and crispy flatbread that's usually made with oats or birch bark. Yep, that's right. This bread is usually made with bark from the birch tree. We'll try those in a taste test, alongside a few other Viking staples like smoked mackerel, de toast, and Skyr. Like I mentioned, a true Viking feast was more likely an assortment of dishes made with things straight off the farm, from a hunt or a catch, vegetables, meat, stews, Skyr, a liquidy type of yogurt, and lots of fish, like torfisk, naturally dried cod, usually caught in Lofoten, Norway. Lutefisk, which is that cod rehydrated using lye, washed and then steamed. Rackfisk, trout sprinkled with salt and fermented for up to a year. All of this was served sort of family style, with it shared among everyone. They did have mead, but actually drank more beer than mead, and they did drink a lot of it, like bottomless, never ending. For their winter solstice celebration called Yule, the Vikings would have had 12 straight days of drinking, feasts, songs, games, and sacrifices to their gods. It was basically a 2-week-long party. Okay, we're gonna get started by making our skause, Viking stew. While there are no actual written recorded recipes from this time period, from this region, I know, it's another one of those, we're gonna use archaeological evidence and historical hypotheses to make an educated guess about what would be in here. So I'm gonna start by adding some reindeer and venison to the pot. Now, they would have used like big bone-in chunks. We unfortunately couldn't find bone-in venison. It's like not the easiest thing to find, but we did find reindeer with the bone-in. So, you know, we're doing the best we can, but I think the bone would have been really important because you get a lot of nutrients from the marrow. But we're gonna start by simmering this until we get it tender, along with a little bit of salt. And then after that, we're gonna take out the bones and add a whole bunch of vegetables. Archaeological evidence has found that Vikings used to cook their meat either roasting on a spit or smoking on a plank, but it turns out their preferred method was actually boiling it in a stew. This was discovered by examining the residue left on the inner rim of the pot, where the fat would float up during boiling, and that's why we decided to go for a stew like this. All right, so our meat has been simmering for a bit, and I think it's as tender as it's gonna be. It's been over 2 hours. So I'm gonna scoop out the meat and then remove the bones, and we're gonna put the meat right back in there and add a whole bunch of veggies. Some of the bones are just falling right off, so that's a good sign. Simmering the meat like bone-in gives you so much more flavor and body and nutrition. And like, you know, if you don't like the bones, just pull them off, no big deal, like what we're doing. Okay, so I've got it all out. And now, let's see how the deboning goes. Let's see how tender we got these reindeers. Yeah, not so bad, not so bad. It's not like as succulent as like a short rib, but I think we're looking good here. I'm gonna cut off the bones and put them aside. Vikings would use stews as a way to stretch meat. They'd keep the same pot rolling and then just top it off with meat, veggies, adjust the seasoning, I mean, that sounds really good. It's like they have a heritage broth going. I've heard of some places actually doing that even today. I'd love to try that broth. Like, I wonder if they have a pot of stew that's been going for generations. How like delicious would that be? And if it just keeps rolling, if it's always on the fire, it's not gonna go bad. Now, because we're using reindeer and venison, this smells a little bit more gamey than beef. Like, there's a hint of funk. But I'm into that, you know? I think it's like one of those things, we've just gotten really used to grass-fed cow, but it's a pretty new thing. No, we've gotten really used to corn-fed cow, but that's a really new thing. Now all the meat is going right back into the pot to continue simmering, and we're gonna add some veggies. We've got some parsnips, carrots, cabbage, and ramsons. These are all vegetables that the Vikings would have farmed. Ramsons are a type of wild green onion, so it's pretty similar to a chive or a scallion. And we're gonna all go into the pot together. It's gonna cook and get really nice and tender. Parsnips going in. I really like parsnips. People don't use them enough. So far, this stew sounds like it's gonna be delicious. I mean, it's just a bunch of veggies and meat simmered together, healthy, wholesome. Now, we're gonna let that cook until it gets really nice and tender. And I'm also gonna add mustard seed, dill seed, and fennel. These are all herbs that were believed to be used by the Vikings at this time. All right, wow. All right, so while this simmers together, I'm gonna get started on my flatbread. Now we get to make our pine bark bread, minus the pine bark. Okay, so they would have made this with pine bark or oats, but I am allergic to pine bark. I know this because I worked somewhere where we made a lot of things with bark. Fancy restaurants do weird things. I found out the hard way. So we're gonna use rolled oats, and they also would have used oats. So we're close. Maybe one of these days we'll have a guest in and I can try and make it with the pine bark, and then they can taste it for me. And it wasn't actually the hard outer bark, it was the inner green tender part that kind of is covered in sap, and then they would grind that into a flour. But today I've got some rolled oats. I'm gonna add a little bit of kosher salt, and I'm gonna mix this all together with our rye flour, and we're gonna add a little bit of water to bring it together into a dough. Today, some versions use instant yeast, but we're going ancient, as usual. Now, this recipe has its roots in a pine bark bread that's made by the Sami people, who are an indigenous tribe in Scandinavia. The Sami people of northern Sweden have eaten this pine bark bread for ages and continue to eat it today. Their territory spanned through Sweden, Norway, Finland, and even Russia, and they were around long before the Vikings. So I want to bring this together into like a kind of stiff dough, because we're going to roll it out. If it's really wet, I don't think we're going to be able to roll it out nice and thin and transfer it to the baking sheet. Now, rye flour is a little different from like regular wheat flour. We're not going to get like a really bouncy glutinous dough. So I think it actually is going to be perfect for rolling into thin crackers. You know, when you make a dough with wheat flour, it gets like a little bit like tough, you know, like, oh, and it doesn't want to stretch out. So I think we're going to pretty easily be able to roll this thin and flat. So I think the coolest thing about these flatbreads is the shape. We're going to roll it into this big, wide circle. It's going to be super flat, and then there's actually a hole in the middle, and what they do is they stack up the crackers on a dowel. So you have this like cracker tree almost. I bet you could decorate with ornaments. Just a stack of crackers. It's really nice. I think it makes it for convenient snacking. You know, walk by the dowel, grab a cracker, move on with your day. I'm gonna spin. You know, you gotta make the bowl work for you. We don't need to rest it. It's not proofing or anything like that. We can go right into rolling these crackers. So it's actually like a pretty nice, quick, and easy bread. We've made so many different kinds of breads on this show. And I'm not complaining in any way. But let us know if there's any breads we missed. What kind of bread do you want to see me make next? We're so close. Look at that. It's really coming together. But you can see, even with all that kneading, we don't really have that bouncy, stretchy kind of thing that you get with regular old wheat flour. Okay, so I'm gonna divide this dough into 3. And we're gonna roll each portion of dough as thin as I can. Okay, cool. Okay, now we divide and conquer our crackers. It's a bread, but it's also kind of a cracker, right? All right, roughly into thirds, just like that. Ooh, this is tough stuff. They were strong back then though, right? All right, let me start with one hunk of dough. And first I'm gonna pat it down into a circle, and then I'm gonna roll it out. I really wonder what the texture would be like if we were using the birch bark. That place where I worked at, I didn't make any bark bread. I made bark ice, bark soda, bark dashi. It got weird. Bark tweels. I bet it was like a bark tweel. This is kind of like a tweel. A tweel is a very thin, like, cracker type situation. So kind of like, I feel like the key to rolling something out and getting relatively smooth edges is kind of starting out with it. I kind of make sure I'm doing this every time I roll out tart dough, pie dough. Just tighten those edges, and it'll minimize the cracks. I don't know how much they cared about having a perfect circle though. Seems like the Vikings were like really modest about their food, so I doubt they were into like something being perfect, more about things being delicious. I'm tired, that was exhausting. Hit it with a little dust so we don't have stickage. And now, this is the part that I'm really excited about. This is a very unique rolling pin. I've never used one like this. Check out all these like little grooves and bumps. I don't know, is it gonna just rip the dough? Or is it just gonna leave pretty indentations? I guess we're gonna find out. So this rolling pin comes to us from Scandinavia, and it's called a Kruskavel. And it's supposed to help make the bread really thin and crispy. The first ever rolling pin was discovered to be used by the Etruscans all the way back to the 9th century BCE. So I really thought that this rolling pin was just gonna rip up the dough, but the dough is so dense and sturdy that it's just like making these nice little dimples. And I see that we're gonna end up with like these extra thin bits where we have the dimples. So we're gonna have like extra crunch. This is hard work. This is why the Vikings were so strong. They didn't need to train for battle, they would just roll these out. Now I'm gonna carve out a little hole in the middle, and this is where they would put the dowel to stack these guys up. So pine bark flour was actually used by the Finnish people during the famines in the 1690s and the 1860s, and it's said to have saved a lot of people from starvation. I'm gonna carve out my little hole, bloop. Now I'm gonna transfer this to a pan to bake, brush with a little bit butter, sprinkle with some salt. So this dough is really, really, really sturdy. Like really sturdy. I can just pick it up, no big deal. Flop it down, it can handle it. Now we're gonna make it tasty. Best part, little butter, little salt. And we're gonna bake this until it's nice and crisp. These little divots have another extra special bonus, and they're like holding on to the little droplets of butter. I'm into this rolling pin. We've become close very quickly. In the Middle Ages, a poor Viking would have eaten better than an English peasant. They made sure to have meat or fish every day. The meat ranged from pork to beef to mutton and even horses. And they preserved a lot of the meat by salting it to keep it from going bad. So now I'm gonna sprinkle on a little bit of salt. Our stew is probably just about done. We're gonna bake this off, get everything together, and have our Viking feast. Here we have our Viking feast. This is our stew that we cooked with the carrots, the parsnips, the venison, the reindeer, and then here's our bread, which I think looks pretty cool. I don't know if I got it all as thin as it's supposed to be, but I don't know, I think it's pretty nice. I like how you can see the oats, and then we've got our other Viking staples. There's your toast, the smoked fish, the Skyr. I'm gonna start by digging in to our stew and bread. I'm gonna ladle myself up some. I mean, it looks really nice. It's a really clear broth. Lots of good veggies in here. You know, this is farm to table stuff, so you really can't go wrong. Really nice looking broth. It came out really pretty and clear. And I'm gonna break off some of this bread. Wait, let's see. So can we stack it on the dowel? It's a little bit thick. Maybe here. That's a little bit too small. It's kind of like a Goldilocks thing. You gotta find the dowel that's just right. We did it. It's so much sturdier than I thought. I thought it would just like break. I didn't understand the whole stacking thing, but I can see now this is pretty like nice and hearty, and you could totally just stack them up and, you know, easy access to your bread. I think we should bring this back. This is kind of cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop playing with my food. Time to eat. So let me break off some of this bread. Ooh, that's very nice and crisp. You can just hear that crunch. It's like a cracker, really nice and thin. This is a really good use of rye flour, which can make a bread really dense, but here we get to really enjoy the nutty flavor of the rye, and it's just like, it's a really nice, crisp, savory cracker. This is actually really tasty, and if they package this up, I would eat this all the time. I can't imagine what the birch bark version would be, but I'm sure that was also delicious. It's a little bit hard, but I think that if you pile on some Skyr and toast, you won't even notice. I think it's gonna be great for dunking into the soup. Oh, break it up like a crouton? Why not? It has a really nice nutty crunch. These are super tasty. I'm gonna take those home. Okay, I'm gonna try my broth. I mean, the broth is delicious. It's just a really clean bone broth. I can taste all the earthy vegetables in there. I'm gonna try the meat. So the meat really struggled to get tender. It's kind of tough with these like wild game kind of meats because, you know, reindeer and venison, they're out running around. They're doing stuff, so their muscles are tight. So the meat's really tight. Even after simmering for 3 hours, the meat is really tight, really tough. This is gonna be a long chew. The best part of this is definitely the broth. The meat is really tough, and venison has this tendency of getting really gamey, so it's a little bit tough and it's a little bit gamey, but the broth has like really nice body. It's really savory, really flavorful. I guess let me get in here and try a parsnip. I love parsnips, but people don't make them enough. I'm gonna get a little parsnip, a little cabbage, a little bit of those ramsons. This is delicious. It's really tasty. There's nothing to not like. The meat's a little bit tough, but whatever. We're ancient times. They had stronger teeth, right? Okay, so this is really tasty, but I'm excited to try the rest of this spread. I wanna put some yogurt on here. No, Skyr, a little bit of Skyr, a fermented dairy product. That's not exactly yogurt, but you know, we're in the same family. Add a little bit of the smoked mackerel. I can eat this all day. This is so good. The Skyr is really mild. It doesn't have the same kind of punch you in the face tang of yogurt or buttermilk, but it's a little bit more chill than that. It feels really creamy and like light in a different way. Like Greek strained yogurt almost like overwhelms you with that protein, kind of sits on your palate. It's really nice, it's really creamy, kind of like sour cream. The smoked mackerel is delicious. I mean, we eat this now still. I love it. I love these oily fish. They really take well to the smoke. The smoke like cuts all that richness of the fish together. This is amazing. I could snack on this nonstop all day. It really works with the crackers because the crackers hold onto their crunch, even under the moisture of the yogurt. Okay, now the jus toast. What's interesting is that doesn't it look like it's in a package, but it's not. This is just what it looks like. Now this is cool. It looks a lot like dulce de leche, more than cheese. It almost looks like a caramel. It's super delicious. Really butterscotchy, melts in your mouth, really creamy. It kind of toes the line between sweet and savory. It's so, so good. I want to take all these leftovers home. Guys, this is really, really tasty. I think this is my favorite spread. I could eat like a Viking every single day. This meal definitely makes me feel like ready and strong for a Viking raid. Like I've got this like really hearty bone broth situation, these good crispy whole grain crackers, the fermented dairy, the smoked fish, like everything here is delicious, wholesome. I can eat this every day. I'm so ready to be a Viking. If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. And if there's any ancient or vintage recipe you want to see me try out, let us know in the comments and I'll see you next time. Now I'm gonna get back to my Viking feast.